Hi, I'm Frank Masiosi, and I'm here with two good friends, former Summit Mayor Jordan Glatt and Brett Haire, chairman of the Other Fella First Foundation. Both Jordan and Brett are trustees of the Other Fella First Foundation, along with Jim Graberis, David Haire, and Neil Trangucci. The Other Fella First Foundation is a little Summit Foundation headquartered at the Summit Diner. It exists to help New Jersey families in distress. It's been around for 18 years, and in that period has raised and given away over $5,750,000. In addition to providing direct assistance to families in distress, they also work with and advise numerous local charities with their fundraising. For more information about their organization, please go to www.otherfellafirstfoundation.org. Today, they have asked me to introduce the launch of a new TV program called Summit Philanthropy. The show will attempt to accomplish a number of local objectives. First, they aim to draw attention to how the Summit community is defined by large number of nonprofits existing in selfless support of our community. Second, they want to provide the viewer with ways to become engaged with Summit charities. Third, they want to highlight the good work done by many of these local organizations by interviewing their leaders. And finally, they want to communicate and underscore the joy that comes from the act of giving. So with that, gentlemen, thank you for joining me here today, or thank you for inviting me to introduce you today. And I'd like to start off by just asking each of you, first you, Jordan, how did you first get involved, have an interest in philanthropy? I assume it was before Other Fella First. Was it your childhood, or what was it?
I'd have to say it's childhood. I grew up with drilled into me that I was just born lucky. My family always felt, we were blessed.
Mm-hmm.
And I just felt like there was always a need that with that comes the ability, if you have the ability, to give back. So I think I really almost want to say all my life, I always had a not-for-profit thing I was working on.
Uh-huh. Okay. Yeah. Brad, how about you? Start with your childhood?
Well, I'm 70, so about 50 years ago, that was close to being a kid. For me, it was really trauma therapy for me. I in another life had a job flying helicopter gunships in Vietnam, and in that period of time I realized how people who were scared and in need of help could very quickly become very traumatized. And in that experience, the personal issue for me was I wanted to help, and I flew something called a Cobra, which was a pretty powerful deterrent, but I could only stay on the station for maybe 15, 20 minutes, and I had to leave. And the guys who I was trying to help, they didn't have that luxury. And so I went home to a hot meal, a bed, a shower, and they stayed out in the mud, eating sea rations and sleeping wherever they could. And I always felt very inadequate, that I couldn't have done more, and very guilty. So for me, giving back and helping sort of helps me deal with that inadequacy and that guilt that still lingers today.
Wow. So in the year 2000, you started the Other Fella First Foundation. Tell us why.
Well, a lot of it had to do with what I just said, but I have three sons, all of whom went to a YMCA camp in upstate New York called Camp Dudley. And the motto of that camp was "The Other Fellow First." And it always kind of stuck with me that that was a pretty noble, simple, transparent concept. And the diner is a very simple, transparent place. And it occurred to me that one day John Corzine was waiting for a cup of coffee. He was standing behind one of the garbage men in town. Didn't really matter who he was. In the diner, everybody was the same. And it just seemed that the confluence of that impression, the fact that I needed this therapy, it all came together, and Jimmy Gruberis, who owns the diner, was kind enough to indulge me, and we launched this simple idea, which over the last 18 years has proven to be very therapeutic for me.
Okay. Jordan, when and why did you join Other Fellow First?
So while I was mayor, I kind of stayed away from joining any not-for-profit boards, obviously in Summit. But one of the things you learn as mayor, Summit is can be a little bit of a Potemkin village. And there's a lot of people that you don't realize in Summit that have needs. And there's like any community, people who are living kind of hand to mouth. And I guess as position of mayor, it wasn't uncommon to get a phone call, whether it was the police, rescue squad. We have a situation, a family, they have no hot water, their water heater broke. Some minor thing has caused the family, if you will, distress. For you and I, we wouldn't even, it would be a meaningless upset, it'd be an inconvenience. For them, it becomes a tragedy very fast. And so the question, I became aware of the other, where do you go to help those families? And the Other Fellow First was a great way to be able to pick up the phone and say, hey, we have a problem, can you help? And I saw the impact, those small, relatively little amounts of money, how much that was able to really prevent some really bad things happening. So after I became mayor, it just seemed like a natural place to spend my time.
Okay. So let's talk a little bit about the achievements of Other Fellow First. It puts a little more color into it so people can understand it better. It's anecdotal stuff. Jordan, why don't you kick it off with one of your most interesting achievements?
So I'm going to start with probably one of the bigger things we've done and more, but I wouldn't say it was necessarily the most fulfilling, okay. In relationship, and you'll get a sense of it. So many people know we led the capital campaign for the rescue squad to build their building. It was a $5 million effort, and the community responded unbelievably. The rescue squad, as you know, as a group, are very good at providing service and giving help. They are horrible at asking for help. So we became kind of the spokespeople and to help them ask the community because they needed help for this building. So it was a very successful campaign. We see the results of it in the building. But that was a fun project to do for the community. But one of the more fulfilling ones is really quite small. We have a gentleman in town, Billy McAdam, who has been selfless to the community. He was an auxiliary policeman. He's always is there whenever you needed help, whether we were doing our turkey drive, whatever, Billy was there. And he wound up trying to help somebody on the side of the road. He saw in distress in another community and was beaten mercilessly. I can never say it, mercilessly. And he's of little means, and his medical bills were outstanding. It's just unbelievable. So we kind of marshaled the community together, told his story, and we were able to raise, I don't know how much, Brett, it was
Close to 60,000.
$60,000 to help him. And just when you saw his reaction to that, it almost made the $5 million squad thing seem like a joke.
Interesting.
So just, and we have a couple of cases like that. Many people know Leroy. I'm sorry. Well, Brett will probably talk about Leroy, but Sandy Stewart, who was the kind of waitress in the diner. She was iconic.
I remember her.
Yeah, she very iconic. She just her whole presence. She was like people would.
Yeah.
She was known, and she passed away after a very long illness, and her family didn't have the money for the funeral. And we were able to step in and make sure that she was given the type of send-off, if you will, that she deserved from this community. And again, the appreciation of her family made it very worthwhile.
Yeah, wow.
So,
Brett, which stories do you
Oh,
remember?
there are a lot of them. I guess one of the recurring and defining activities that we engage in annually is the frozen turkey drive, which is held the Sunday before Thanksgiving from 1 to 4 in the afternoon in front of the diner. We raise money. We collect frozen turkeys and canned goods, all for the New Jersey Community Food Bank. This coming November 18th will mark the 11th time we've done that. And over the years, I think we've raised close to $100,000 in cash on that day in aggregate, maybe 28 tons of turkey, and about 25 tons of groceries. And it's a day when a lot of folks in Summit show up. We try to, with the benefit of the police department, turn that corner into a drive-by opportunity for people to quickly stop, get out of their car, make their donation. And right before Thanksgiving, I think the community really enjoys the opportunity to have a way to participate in helping the less fortunate.
It's always a great turnout.
it's a great way to see friends too that you
Yeah.
haven't seen almost all year as
Yeah.
they come by.
Yeah.
So that's one. Jordan mentioned Leroy Horn, who was a coach in town for a long time. And Leroy found himself on the wrong end of a medical problem, which ballooned into a lot of other problems, and found himself very quickly in a situation where financially he was overwhelmed. And similar to the Billy McAdams story, we hosted a dinner at the diner as a centerpiece of our fundraising effort. And again, the community, which is exceptionally generous, was very generous to our story, and Leroy was the beneficiary of about $75,000 that helped him get on his feet again. And I guess the last story, which is reasonably recent, this past January, I think January, New Year's Day, there's an apartment building on Summit Avenue, which in the middle of the night burned down. There were 12 families in the building. Fortunately, nobody was hurt, but the building was gutted, and it was a very cold day, and all of those families were basically on the street. And the mayor, Nora Radis, called us and said, Can you help so that these folks can enjoy some reasonably quick response? We're a small organization. We don't have a grants committee. It's a phone call to Jordan, Jimmy, Neil, Dave, and whatever we're going to do gets decided upon pretty quickly. And in concert with the YMCA, we managed to put together a program that raised close to $100,000 for those families. So those three stories, coupled with Jordan's three, are a smattering of some of the things we do. Basically, we like to think of ourselves as a very quiet SEAL team that is available to the community when a problem surfaces that the Red Cross isn't going to deal with because it's not big enough for the Red Cross. It's not big enough for a lot of the other organizations in town, and those sort of fall between the cracks. And we kind of like to think of ourselves as a community shock absorber, trying to keep the unity in the word community by giving folks the opportunity to give.
You know, two things strike me about these stories. One is some of your undertakings are huge in magnitude, like the first aid squad, but then you get down to the individual level in a number of cases, and everything in between. The other thing that strikes me is, and I didn't realize this in connection with the Summit Avenue fire, is that your involvement began because the mayor reached out to you, which is, I think, very noteworthy and really an endorsement of the Other Fella First Foundation. So I'd like to ask Jordan, what are some of the quiet day activities that Other Fella First does that maybe people don't know about?
So I don't want to avoid the question, but I've kind of
You have stealth activities?
well, it's not stealth, but let's remember we're dealing with philanthropy, so people's giving. A lot of people want to be quiet about their support for numerous reasons, and we're also dealing with people who a lot of times, pride is a very personal thing, and so we'll give a lot of money quietly to, if you will, stealth, to use the word in your question, without making a big deal of it, so that they, because of people's dignity. And I think that's one of the things I really like about the foundation is that where we can, we try and do things very quietly. Nobody likes to be, we have a saying, it's a lot more fun to give than to get. And people feel awkward when they're taking charity. And I want to just repeat, one of the things I really like about the organization is that we maintain that quiet respect for people.
Okay. Brett, I know that you help other nonprofits. Can you talk a little bit about that? How do you do that?
Well, Summit is a very interesting place. A small town, but it's got a huge heart. And most of the organizations that we know in town are all passionate about something. If it's SAGE, if it's the Rescue Squad, if it's the interfaith organization across the street, Family Promise across the street from the diner. All of these organizations are great at something, but all of them loathe the thought of asking for money. And Mother Teresa reminds us that without a margin, there's no mission. And so while you might loathe asking folks for help, sooner or later, you got to get around to it, or you're going out of business. And mostly because of my partner Jordan and his role as the mayor, the former mayor, people are very comfortable in approaching Jordan because they know that he's always been there for them in one form or another. And so what we try to do is help the organization tell their story. We live in a country where most successful people that everybody knows, whether it's Bruce Springsteen or Steve Jobs or Walt Disney or Oprah Winfrey, these people are all great storytellers. They all know how to communicate. And a lot of the organizations in town are great at something, but communication isn't always one of their sweet spots. So what we try to help them with is distilling their story so that people will care. And over the years, I think we've been pretty good at it. It's all pro bono. And we've got clients that are throughout the community who from time to time ask us to help with their fundraising and their storytelling.
Okay. So Jordan, going forward, you're going to have a number of episodes of this show. What are viewers likely to see when they tune in?
So I think what will strike them the most is the humanity of Summit. I think when you start scratching the surface just a little bit, they'll see their friends and neighbors of how much time they're giving to the different causes in Summit. It's amazing, the participation that's in town, and I think it will hopefully ignite others to join us and find their passion around town.
Okay. Brett, any closing thoughts?
Well, I guess I would like to thank you, Frank, and Community TV for this opportunity to tell our story. I guess the closing thought is that Winston Churchill's got a great line that we use in all of our fundraising, that we think our efforts try to underscore, and that is you make a living by what you get. You make a life by what you give. And giving is a lot more fulfilling than getting. And we hope that through this show, we can showcase some very selfless people in this community to inspire others to get involved.
Well, I want to say that I also, to Jordan's comment, have been very impressed with the magnitude of giving in Summit. It really is incredible. I'm looking forward to watching all of your shows as they roll out, and I want to say especially thanks to both of you and to the other trustees of the Other Fellow First Foundation for what you guys do for our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Frank.
Thank you for watching this program on HTTV, and we'll see you next time.